Okay, so of course, dito na tayo sa pinaka-example of learning outcome sa mga itong categories of learning, itong 5 categories of learning. Of course, the first one is the verbal information. So sa example of learning outcome natin, it is stating previously learned materials such as facts, concept, principles, and procedures. For example, is listing the 14 learner-centered psychological principles. For example, reviewing the lessons. Ganyan, reviewing the lessons. So, ito yung example natin. Of course, si teacher, pumasok siya sa classroom. Hindi lang naman basta panibagong lesson kaagad without asking the student if you already has the prior knowledge of this topic or this idea, diba? Do you have any idea about this one? Ganyan. Of course, in this verbal informations, it is the reviewing the lessons. Sabi nga nila, ito yung law of continuity. Yeah, law of continuity, sabi nila. So, which is, ito na yung to recall the informations. Ayun, sabi dito is stating the previously learned materials sa mga bata para hindi mapag-iwanan yung mga na talagang napag-aralan nila na which is magagamit pa. For example, ito, pinag-aaralan natin ngayon itong Gagne conditions of learning. Gagne's conditions of learning. Which is, prior to this, pinag-aralan muna natin si information processing theory. Which is, in that information processing theory, pinag-aaralan natin doon yung how to store information, yung store information, yung how we acquire information, diba? So after that, ito mapapag-aralan natin itong Gagne of conditions of learning, diba? Ayan yung prior knowledge natin, and ito yung present lesson natin, ganon. So in that our prior knowledge, nagkakaroon na tayo ng idea how to restore information, how to acquire information, diba? This verbal information, ganon. Basta ito yung sa verbal information, ito yung mga reviewing the lesson or that we previously learned materials. Okay, so the conditions of learning in this verbal information, the first one is to draw attention to distinctive features by variation in print or speech. Number 2, present information so that it can be made into chunks. And 3, provide a meaningful context for effective encoding information. Provide cues for effective recall and generalizations of information. Nandito pa rin si recall, which is kailangan talaga natin state the previously learned materials to the students, diba? And the next one is the intellectual skills, which is the intellectual skills. We have the 5 subcategories, which are the discriminations, the concrete concepts, defined concepts, the rule, and the higher order rules. The first one is the discriminations. Sabi dito, it is distinguishing objects, features, or symbols. For example, it is distinguishing an even and odd number. Sasabihin mo sa mga students mo na, okay, so can you give me an odd number and even number based on our lessons that we tackled yesterday? Ganyan. So, in number 2, concrete concepts. Ayan. It is identifying classes of concrete objects, features, or events. Example is picking out all red beads from a bowl of beads. Okay. Ang instruction mo is ihiwalay nila yung red sa ibang kulay ng beads. Ayan ang instruction mo. Tapos may isang yung mga bata is hiniwalay nila lahat yung mga kulay sa bowl. Yung mga red, yung mga green, ganyan. Pero ang instruction mo lang is yung red lang ihiwalay. Ganyan. Ayun yung concrete concept, which is may model ka na doon, which is the picking out all red beads. Ganyan. And the next one is defined concept. It is classifying new examples of events or ideas by their definitions. Example is, she sells seashells as alliteration. Okay. Of course, sasabihin ng mga bata, pagka repeated consonant pala is tatawagin nating alliteration. Ayan. Tapos, of course, pagka nagpa-quiz ka ng mga ganon, yung mga repeated consonant, ang sagot nila is alliteration. And the next one is the Rules. Sa rules naman, it is applying a single relationship to solve a class of problems and computing average monthly income of a company. Sa rules naman, about applying a single relationship to solve a class of problem. Example nito is computing or about computation. Okay, about computation. Also, okay, sabihin mo sa mga students mo, okay, sige nga, mag-compute na kayo about the parameter using the formula of the parameter. Kasi parameter is only solving the sides of the triangle. So, binibigay mo lang yung, binibigay mo lang yung may mga value na, yung isosolve nila using that formula. Ganon. Tapos, sa order rules naman, is applying a new combination of rules to solve a complex na. Okay, for example is, bibigyan mo yung estudyante mo ng 20 pesos. Tapos, sasabihin mo sa kanya na, sige nga, i-budget mo nga ito sa loob ng 3 days. Yan. Of course, isipin ng students, ano yung magagawa? So, in that way, pumapasok na yung problem solving kung paano yung gagawin. It is complex problem talaga pumapasok or the rules. Ganyan. So, sa conditions of learning new intellectual skills, first one is call attention to distinctive features. Stay within the limits of working memory. Stimulate the recall of previously learned component skills. Present verbal cues to the ordering of combination of component skills. Schedule occasions for practice and space review. Use of a variety context to promote transfer. Okay. Next, the third category is the cognitive strategies. The example of learning outcome is the employing personal ways to guide learning, thinking, acting, and feeling. For example, constructing concept maps of topics being studied. Yeah. Sa concept map, it can be through mind map. Kasi with the use of mind map, we use the mind map na ito yung other way of learning ng mga bata. Reviewing a lesson, which is sa mind map, nilalagay lang natin yung mga keywords, important details para mas natandaan natin yung mga details ng lesson natin. Sa mind map na yun, madaming mga sanga-sanga, ganyan nilalagay ng mga bata. So, ito yung way of learning ng mga bata. O strategy of learning o technique ng mga bata. Which is about this concept maps. So, for example, sasabihin mo sa mga estudyante mo na, okay, so, based on our discussion yesterday, like, yung mga iba't ibang theory, gawa kayo ng mga mind map about these 6 developmental theories of Jean Piaget's theory, Sigmund Freud's theory, Erik Erikson's theory, Goldberg's theory, Bronfenbrenner's theory, and Vygotsky theory. Okay nga, so maggawa kayo ng concept map about your understanding about these theories. Ayan. So in that way, gagawa sila ng concept map about your understanding. And in the conditions of learning naman, this describe or demonstrate the strategy. Ayan. Provide a variety of occasions for practice using the strategy. Provide informative feedback as to the creativity or originality of the strategy or outcome. So we have ways inputting schema in our brain, like how we used to recall informations or ideas. So, kaya tinawag itong cognitive strategies. Okay. The next one is the attitudes. Attitude, the example of learning outcome is the choosing personal action based on internal states of understanding and feeling. Example, deciding to avoid soft drinks and drinking at least 8 glasses of water every day. So, you are asking your student na, okay, so, based on theory of Sigmund Freud, sige nga, mag-share na kayo ng mga experience na nakita ninyo, na na-apply ninyo sa sarili ninyo. Sigmund Freud is yung mga psychosexual theory, yung mga oral, yung mga anal, yung mga phallic, latency, and genital. sige nga, mag-share nga kayo, make it personal, ganyan. So in that way, yung pag-share pa lang nila ng kanilang personal experiences, mas nakakontextualize o nalolocalize yung pinaka-topic. Yan, pinaka-topic ninyo. So, yung sa conditions of learning, it is establish an expectancy of success associated with the desired attitude. Assure student identification with an admired human model. Arrange for communication or demonstration of choice of personal action. Give feedback for successful performance or allow observation of feedback in the human model. So, ayan talaga yung pinaka-personal experience talaga nila. Na maano nila na, yun pala yun. Apply ko na pala yung theory ni Sigmund Freud. Nakaisip sila. Motor skills naman, it is executing performances involving the use of muscles. So, sa motor skills, yung motor umaandar, so dapat umaandar din yung mga estudyante or teachers. So, sa motor skills, dapat hindi lang more on memorizations, more on traditional, but also, dapat mag-andin tayo ng mga performances or authentic tasks. Yan, kailangan talaga maan natin yung mga learning, dapat yung action. Yan, learning through action. So, in that way, para yung sa knowledge ng mga bata is not only siya ng through memorization, ganyan, dapat sa mga performance tasks, ganyan, para mga yung mga motor skills, mga kinesthetic. Okay, so sa conditions of learning, present verbal or other guidance to cue the executive subroutine, arrange repeated practice, furnish immediate feedback as to the accuracy of performance, encourage the use of mental practice. Yung example dito yung single dance, diba? Sa step ng single dance, o yung mga tinikling dance, of course, provide ka ng mga bamboo, ganon, tapos papagsayawin mo sila, okay, mano yung mga motor skills nila. So, ayun, yung mga performances, tasks, yung mga authentic tasks, ganyan, kailangan ma-apply sa mga estudyante. Not only about traditional learning, dapat more also authentic learning, or group collaboration. Yeah. Educational implications of Gagne conditions of learning in my part. Of course, the first one is to help teachers choose the right teaching method. So, ito, papasok dito yun sa different instruction, which different learning outcomes. Which is kailangan, hindi lang isang strategy o isang way of instruction yung ginagawa natin sa classroom. Dapat, mag-apply tayo pa ng mga more strategies for the students to learn more. Maging meaningful yung teaching and learning process natin, ganyan. So, in that way, for example, nga lang sa verbal information is about knowing facts, and knowing facts, yung mga names, ganyan. While yung sa intellectual skills, kailangan natin yung mga problem solving skills, mga practice, mga authentic tasks, performances, ganyan. So, as a teacher, kailangan natin alamin kung ano yung learning target natin para mas makapili tayo ng mga tamang strategy na apply natin sa classroom sa mga bata. And the next one is encourage step-by-step sequence learning. Yung step-by-step sequence learning, ito yung procedural learning natin. Of course, pag nagturo tayo, kailangan procedural, step-by-step, from basic to difficult. Hindi mag-umpisa sa difficult to basic. Ganyan. Dapat procedural for us to navigate the more meaningful learning outcomes, yung teaching and learning process. Okay. So, ayun. Dapat, as a teacher, mag-plan tayo. Dapat muna basic. Tuturo ka sa mga bata. Tapos, difficult. Ganyan. Para mas maganda yung maging effective yung learning outcome. And the next one is guides teachers to create effective learning conditions. So, yung di ba meron tayong dalawang conditions dito, yung internal and the external. Pag sinabi natin internal, ito yung sa paloob ng bata. Ito yung prior knowledge. Pag sinabing external, ito na yung stimulus ng bata kung paano, as a teacher, kung paano natin sila matulungan to learn, to have them to learn. To have them learn. Ayan. Example, yung mga to gain their attention, yung mga interactive games, motivation, paano natin yan makukultivate, yung mga visuals, ganyan, mga, visual aids, yung interactive games nga, ganun. Tapos, sa number 4, provides a framework for lesson planning, yung 9 events of instructions. Yan, kailangan natin yun pagka nag-lesson plan tayo, gumagawa tayo yung lesson plan, dapat may apply natin yung 9 events of instruction. Yan. And number 5, improves retention and transfer of learning. Ayan, sinabi ko kanina, when we say retention, ito na yung naalala ng bata na natutunan niya. Tapos, yung natutunan niya yun, which magagamit niya in the future. Can be through different situations. Sa totoong buhay, ayun yung tinatawag na transfer naman yun. Na hindi lang basta maalala ng bata. As a teacher, hindi lang basta ibabato mo yung information na sige, kaya mo yan. Sige, kabisaduhin niyo yan, ganyan. Of course, as a teacher, tayong gagawa ng paraan na kailangan maitanim sa utak ng bata na para in the future magamit nila yung information na yan through different situation. Yan. Ayun yung tinatawag na improved retention and transfer of learning, which is ito yung implication na itong maganda siya para, of course, para maging more meaningful talaga yung pinaka lesson o informations na binibigay mo sa mga bata. And the last one is that promotes active and independent learning. So, dito na, promotes active and independent. Ito na, which is, ito na yung mga cognitive strategies. Now, how people learn, this how student learn nga yung mga, how they study, gano'n, yung paano sila natututo, paano nila mas mapapadali yung kanilang pag-aaral, pag-memorize ng kanilang study, ganyan. Which is, ayun, as an independent learners, ayun, of course, sila mismo yung gagawa ng way of them to ayun, to study their lesson, yung problem solving nila, para magamit yung problem solving nila, para nila ma-memorize yung mga details, yan, ginagawa nila. So, ganun, ay yung mga promotes active and independent learning. So, ito yung 6 na educational implications sa part ko. So, and that's all. Thank you for listening. And the next reporter is Miss Jima.